Well, good afternoon, everybody. I hope everybody's having a fantastic day. So we're talking about winter gardening. We'll give a few minutes for people to trickle in, and then we can get started. Let's see here. Hey, Danlo, I don't know if you're still here. But okay, enough waiting. You guys can catch the replay, whatever. I'll fill you in as we get going if you're new. But this is that time of year, right? We're all getting ready for winter and we're planting fall, and you start to get basically a little sad that the season's coming to an end. But in fact, it's kind of just starting. So there's a lot of things that you can do, and growing into or through the winter season is something we want to see here. Not necessarily saying that like no matter where you are, you can grow all winter long. That's not what we're saying at all. But what we're saying is we can grow into the winter season, and a lot of people can in fact grow straight through the winter. So there's a part of this that we have to think about, and it comes down to being realistic with yourself. How much do you want to grow and what do you want to grow? That's the real question. There's a lot of options there, and once we figure out what we want to do, how we're growing, and what can grow in our areas, then we can really start to make a plan. So at any point during this, if you guys have any questions, just fire away. I'm going to just kind of go back and forth between you guys, and then talking about winter gardening, growing into winter, what we can do. And then at the end, we'll open it up for whatever. And as usual, up top, there is a Q&A thing that you can, for what you want the next live to be about. So go ahead and put your ideas in there, and at the end, we'll do a poll for it so that we know what we want to do next week. But, the first thing to do is decide, what are your goals for winter? What do I want to do? And it's an interesting concept, because most people are probably going to say, well, I want to grow peppers and tomatoes all winter. Well, that's not really what we're talking about here. If that's what you want to do, straight up get a greenhouse, heat it, grow it, and you're done. Don't let it go below 50 at night, and just grow. But most people don't have access to a greenhouse or access to something like that. Some constant heat. And if you're in an area where you don't get below 50, then good on you. It's just all about basically balancing the cold and the wet and all that stuff. So Danlo wants to know if hardening off is basically the same as this time of year from spring. Basically, yes, it is. Hardening off is always the same process. The colder it gets, the more careful we have to be. Just like the hotter it is, the more careful we have to be. But even still, it is basically the same process. But once we get going into, and we've gotten it out of our mind that we want to grow tomatoes and peppers and squash and all that all winter, and we get realistic with ourselves, the question becomes like, what can I grow? And so there's different levels of crops that can handle cold. And, what we're talking about here is at bare minimum growing into the winter. So December 21st is the first day of winter. Our goal should be like, hey, I want to learn how to do it. I want to harvest something on December 21st at minimum. And so that would be considered winter gardening. The more you want to do as far as protection and stuff like that, then the more you can grow. But the hardiest crops for winter, these are the crops that will take a freeze. They will go in, They will not necessarily die. 26 degrees is basically fine for them. That's the important part, that we know those plants. And so those plants, in no specific order, are collards, kale, cabbage, even broccoli, and turnips can really fall into that category as well. Turnips and rutabagas, Brussels sprouts, and what else? Spinach does surprisingly well, and that's really rounds out like mustard greens. Those are the hardiest of hardies. So if you put those in your garden, I'm not going to sit here on this channel and live in front of the world and say, hey, if you grow these, you're going to make it. Like, that's absolutely not the case. But you're setting yourself up for a much better success rate, because you now have a garden filled with things that are more hardy, that can take a cold. So even if we're going to add season extension, which we'll get into, that's something that, you've already got a layer of protection. And then you go to the rest, like lettuces, bok choy, radishes, kohlrabi, which is actually kind of falls in between, chard, all of those. And, there's others. They will take a cold, but they don't like to get real cold, especially your lettuce. Your lettuce is highly susceptible. I've had it go to about 28 degrees, and it'll come back, but it'll start showing a little bit of funkiness to it. Hey, Metalhead Homestead and Brian. Brian wants to know, what's the best cover crop for winter? It depends on where you are. So a lot of people do a cover crop that would be like a winter kill cover crop, meaning you plant it now, winter will kill it off, and then it'll feed the garden. You do different kinds of peas. Winter ryegrass is a good one. I've done that before. If you want something that will absolutely die, buckwheat is a great one. Anything like that. It just depends on how cold you get, and then moving forward. So, if you want something that's pretty frost sensitive, that will not reseed at this point, you could go with like a buckwheat or something like that. And I try to keep cover crops real simple. You can get super technical, but if you want something more hardy, mustard greens is a good one. And I like to do those because I like to eat them. And then at the end of the year, I chop up the leaves and the roots and I put them back in the soil, and it helps fight root knot nematodes for tomatoes. So, you can kind of do that as well. And they are, again, they're in that top list of the pretty hardy ones. So once we figure out the plants we want to grow and we get them going, then we start to think, okay, now what's it going to take to get it to grow? So we need our usual suspects: sunlight, food, and water. That's what we need. The sunlight's lower this time of year. The food you're probably going to need to provide, because you're not getting as much composting in the garden. The breakdown's not as fast, and the water is more prevalent. So generally speaking, I know there's areas of droughts and stuff like that, but when you start to get these things and they start to take place and the rains are coming, it's cooler, you're not getting the evaporation. We were just talking about this in the Backyard Gardens podcast this morning. You're going to start having, your plants won't grow as fast, and it's normal. It's absolutely normal this time of year. So if you've got something that's a 80-day from days to harvest, you're probably going to want to think of it as 100 days because of that lower sun angle. Super unsexy subject on every platform I've ever been on. Anytime I talk about it, look, somebody just checked out right there. It happens, but it is the most important part of this. If you don't have sunlight, you don't have growth. So I will continue to talk about that until the cows come home, because it is super important, especially if you're like me and you have a garden where you have shade around it, then you're really battling it. But that being said, it's not the end of the world. So then the next thing we need to consider is, how much do we want to put into our garden? How much effort do we want to put into it? Do we want to make, low tunnels? Do we want to build a greenhouse? Do you want to just put a frost blanket over it? Do you want to just leave it out there and pray that it's fine? Like those are all things that you need to decide for yourself, and then what level you want to go to at this. because there is no doubt that winter gardening is a gamble. The thing is you can kind of favor it in your odds by doing certain things. Again, planting the right crops, using season extension devices. At bare minimum, a frost blanket will help. You're just keeping that frost off the plant, less damage. But I'm a big fan of low tunnels. I like them. Where I am, I can set up a low tunnel, and I may only need to use it 5 or 6 times at most. But it's always set in place for that because of the way our climate is. We can drop low, but then we go high, and I can kind of use that to my advantage. So that's where I sit in it. I'm a big fan of low tunnels. I think they work wonderfully. When I lived in New England, I used a low tunnel, and I had to add a little bit of heat to it, which I can get to in a minute, and that really helped as well. And I was growing in New England. I was shoveling out snow from around my standing snow from around my low tunnel, and still had spinach and stuff like that. It was green, not frozen in there. So it makes a big difference. So that being said, you've got to figure out what's comfortable with you. Frost blanket or with nothing, you basically know the limits. You know how cold it's going to get. I just told you how cold these plants can get. I gave you the 2 tiers. You can kind of decide from there. And again, we've got some new people coming in. If you're here to learn how to grow tomatoes and peppers and you don't have a greenhouse and don't plan to get one in the wintertime, this isn't for you because that's not really realistic. I'm really big into the realistic part of this and to what makes it successful. And this is what makes it successful. So you start thinking about it, and if you put a low tunnel on, I did a test last year, and I'm only going to focus on the lowest lows. I'm not really going to focus about the daytime temperatures too much because obviously in a low tunnel, it will be higher. Typically speaking, during the day, we're not really concerned about the temperatures because it's going to be warming. And if you're using a low tunnel, it's automatically going to be warmer in there because that's what it does. But at night, your lowest low temperatures, I was averaging in my low tunnel about 1 degree or 2 above the low. Now, what does that look like though? That doesn't seem like a big deal, but if you're getting, like we just said, cabbage can make it to 26 degrees easily, but it's 28 degrees. Well, now you've got a buffer, right? Then I took and I put some buckets of water in there. I think I put 1 bucket of water in there, and I was able to raise it another degree. So that's 3 degrees with a 5-gallon bucket of water in it. So now at 26 degrees, we're at 29 degrees, which is lettuce. Everything that we grow in winter for the cool season can make it through 29 degrees. The biggest aspect behind winter gardening, and other than the sunlight, which is very important, is your rebound temperatures in the next day after a freeze. That is very, very important. These plants can take a freeze, but if they can warm back up and the cells can loosen up inside of them, then that is what's going to make a difference. So that is what determines the survival rate of a winter garden. After that, you have the temperature fluctuations, right? So if it's 25 degrees at night and it's 75 degrees in the daytime, you're going to have issues. So those low tunnels, which we all know, they heat up very fast, they need to be vented. So you need to do something like that, okay? It's very, very important that we try to not eliminate, but minimize that temperature swing. So once we do that, now we're starting to play with fire a little bit. We're able to kind of navigate through the winter weather to some extent. And again, you may only get a little bit into the winter season, but if you're new to fall gardening, if you can grow into the first day of winter, you've now officially grown in 4 seasons of the year. So the definition of season extension, which this is not the official definition, but this is the definition that I go by and that we go by on the Backyard Gardens podcast. We actually stopped a recording and discussed it one day, was the the season extension is anything past your growing season. So your growing season is from first frost, the last frost to first frost. Anything in between there is your growing season. So if you grow something after your first frost, you're now, no matter if you put anything on, you're extending your season. So it's season extension at that point, right? And just knowing the variety and the species of plant that you grow that can handle these changes and these cold temperatures is automatic season extension. Okay, super important to understand that. So when we move forward, see, the first day of winter is, no, let me take a step back. The first day of fall, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, is February, or not February. What am I talking about? February, September 21st. So from September 21st into December 21st, that's your fall season. So we need to have our plants in the ground. Like by now, you should have plants in the ground, or you should be getting transplants to put in the ground very, very soon. And that's going to give these plants enough time to get comfortable in the ground, because the stronger the plant is when that cold comes, the better off it'll be. You can still go into the store and buy a transplant all the way up until your first frost date. You can put it in the day before and think, great, I got it. And then the frost is going to come, bingo, bango, it's going to freeze. It's not going to have the life support to keep it going, right? It is a stressful time for it, but what I struggled to understand when I started, and I find a lot of people understand, is exactly how these cool season crops operate in cool seasons. Like in spring, we're used to planting cabbage in spring. What's different about spring? It's consistently warming up. If you zoom out, it's always warming up in spring. So we understand that. But what we don't understand in the fall, as it's still cooling down, there is a sweet spot in which these plants are really thriving in this cooler weather, and weather that we wouldn't really consider optimum growing, because we're wanting tomatoes and peppers and cucumbers and all that crap. But, they need higher temperatures. But when it gets lower and cooler, these plants are really thriving, and they're like, bring it on. I want more. I want to do this. So we know that moving forward, we know that this is how, my phone just dinging threw me off course. This is how we're going to move forward into the season, because now we know that these plants are comfortable in the cool weather. They like it. They don't struggle, right? And so once you understand that, then you start saying, okay, now I need to add my season extension. So going backwards a little bit, a frost blanket, it literally just stops the frost from hitting the leaves. That's really about it. A lot of times they're breathable, so you could leave them on and not really take them off during the day, which is really nice. So you can do multi-tiered approaches. I mean, it depends, like, again, how much do you want to spend on it? And that's what I look at. How much do I want to spend on my garden? Do I want to have a season of a frost blanket and then a season of a low tunnel with plastic on it, and then a season with shade cloth on it? Like, do I want to do all that? Not specifically, I don't. So, but you could do that. And then what that'll do is when the frost hits the leaves of the plant, it makes the cells clench up and then they start to die off. And if they don't have a rebound, then that's where the issues come in, because they can't heal themselves. Because like the biggest thing that I've grown that is really susceptible to frost in the fall is lettuce. Lettuce in itself is pure water. I mean, how many times have you cut lettuce and seen water drip out of it? You know what I mean? It's just really, really filled with water. So when it freezes, what does that do? And then it destroys the cells and you start to get that die off, right? And so that's how we get, like, our spring lettuce is way more pretty than our fall lettuce. Absolutely. But at the same time, in the spring, we're constantly battling the chance of it bolting. Whereas in the winter, we're not really battling that. And I can grow lettuce here. If I use a cover, I would say up until middle January, roughly. And then after that, it's really a crapshoot of how long it's going to last. So now what typically happens is I forget to cover it. I get complacent and I forget to go out. It is what it is. So that's what a frost blanket does. We know what a low tunnel does, and then obviously with nothing, it's just open to the air. Anything can happen. So all of these things will determine what we do in a winter garden. Watering is a big issue. So typically it's the rainy season, it's snow, it's the wet season. I'm not suggesting that you're going to grow a winter garden and just have, kale plants growing out of the snow looking beautiful. If you're getting a lot of snow, you got to put a cover on it, or else, it's not going to get light, this, that, and the other. But with that snow comes excess water. You get a warm day, the ground gets wet, and it stays wet, and it stays soggy. So you got to be very careful about that. There are times in my garden where I won't water in the winter for 2 weeks. Sometimes you don't need it. There's plenty of the ground's wet. We'll get a rain shower or something like that. And so we can make that adjustment as needed. Are there any questions while I take a sip of water? My mouth is dry. So I'm going to kind of, over the coming weeks and months, I'll breaking this down, especially as my garden gets built back up into winter mode. I'll start doing that. So you'll be able to see more of it, and probably each subject in a little bit more detail, hopefully a little bit more visual. But the next thing is like feeding. So we still need to fertilize. They still need food. And one of the tricks with fall into winter gardening is you've probably been growing in that bed for 3 seasons now: spring, summer, fall, going into winter. So there's a lot, your soil is depleted. It's run down. So you've got to keep feeding it, right? So, what we need to understand though is with the cooler temperatures brings slower breakdown. So if we use an organic fertilizer, what is organic fertilizer? Like, how does it start to work? It goes in the soil, it starts to break down, feeds the soil, which feeds the plants. So we're not getting that composting or that decomposition that we want as quickly. So typically, if you put an organic fertilizer down, you'll start to see changes within about 2 weeks in the growing season, from anywhere from 10 to 14 days. You'll start to see your organic fertilizer kick in. In the wintertime, it could be up to a month. So you need to be planning for that. You need to be getting ready for it. And so what I do is I front load my fertilizer. I plant it, I fertilize at planting. I fertilize a month later, and then I'll fertilize a month later. And the next one will be kind of heavy, and then it'll kind of die out, right? Then not the garden necessarily, but just the fertilizer. But I'll come back, and if my plants are growing and they're still doing it, then I'll give it another shot. But I know at this point, there's not going to be a lot of fertilizer being used up. It's going to sit in the soil until it starts to warm. Now, luckily in my area, we will get those warm days and we will get those warm spells. But even still, we can get, it's very common in February for us to get, a mid 70 to 80 degree day here and there. Not anything stretched out, but it's funny. We can get 2-3 days of that kind of weather and the soil is still cold. I mean, it's still cool to the touch, and especially if you put your finger down, it's even more so. And then you put mulch on top of that, and then you're really just kind of causing, you can see what's going on, because what does mulch do? It'll stop from the ground from like hard freezing. Basically, it won't freeze as hard as the outside ground, but the inside ground will freeze, and it just won't be as hard. So a lot of people say it warms the soil. Not so much, but it protects it from that, deep cold. But at the same time, it's also retaining moisture. So we got to think about all of that. And then you put in your fertilizer, and now you got to think about how the fertilizer is not really kicking in. And with that cooler temperature in there, it's going to be even slower. So you need to manage that the way you want to do it. So, and then, the biggest thing that I say is plant early, feed early, slow down your watering, and cover. And then you can go as long as you possibly can. So Brian, no way he's going to be able to afford a greenhouse. You're going to have to DIY it. Yeah, it's crazy. You know, it's things are very expensive, and you know, a lot of people are like, well, inflation is going to go down. Prices will never ever go down. They may go down a little bit, but I remember when I was younger, Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans, and overnight we went from like $1.50 a gallon to like $2.50 a gallon, and it never went down after that. Even after all the refineries and everything opened up, it kept going. So you know, we see that, and I know that those prices will never go down, but you don't necessarily. And you know, as I love my greenhouse, I have that video that, I mean, that's still, people comment every day on it, and it's annoying because they don't watch the whole video, so they're asking me questions that I answered in the video. But I don't necessarily think you have to have a greenhouse to grow. I mean, if you're gonna add heat to it, absolutely, but that's a whole special situation with a special greenhouse. You know, you need a higher quality greenhouse. I mean, it costs us $5 a day to heat our greenhouse. Like, I'm absolutely not. But we found ways to make it work, and we can use it, and we use it within our abilities. And I like that, but it's not absolutely necessary. I mean, you see in my garden, I've got that the tunnel trellises, the cattle panels. Just put that up and throw some plastic over it and put a door around it, and you've got the same damn thing. It's probably a better greenhouse than what I have. And it costs you, let's see, the cattle panels are $20 each, so that's $40 for two, which would make, if you leave a little gap in the middle, you could get a 10-foot long greenhouse by 4 or 5 foot wide. And then you buy the plastic, you could probably do it for about $150 to $200. You could make that, you know? Oh, let's see here. People talking about where they live. Portland, Oregon. Howdy, howdy. Yeah, Brian, once they get the taste of the money, they'll never go down. Hey, look, I'd be the same way if I could control the world. But actually, I probably wouldn't. I'd probably be broke. Kyle, do you like the greenhouse? And what are you growing it in the wintertime? Melissa's just starting a garden in Central Texas, Zone 8A. But I've only started with squash because it was the only thing that survived an unexpected cold front that came in. Melissa, you should be just about ready to start planting your fall crops now. Cabbages and all that stuff. Hey, Jeff. Yeah, Jeff, I'm with you. That the summer heat, which we are having an amazing September so far. It has not been insanely hot, but the heat that you'll get this time of year will set you back for the winter as well. I mean, you get a nice cool week, you put it in, and then you get that crazy heat, bam, it just cooks it. So, Crockett, I do fertilize. I just talked about that. I fertilize heavy in the fall in preparation for winter. And then as winter comes and the soil cools and it stays more damp, this fertilizer will take longer to break down. So then I do the best I can, but I try and front load as much as possible. The goal here is to have harvest at the optimum time, right when your first frost is coming, a little bit after, stuff like that. If you're planting these plants that we were talking about earlier, your first frost date is not a big deal. It's not the end of the world. It's just another beginning. And so that's really what we're trying to look at here, is what makes it another beginning, what makes it so it's easier for us. And, so fertilizing all the way through to try and get as much growth in the warmth. And then as it gets cold and the plants start to slow down, then we just kind of cut back. But yeah, we do that. And we'll do more of I'll use my injector more so, especially like right after my frost and we get a warm day or a warm spell, then I'll push some fertilizer through the injector, some liquid fertilizer we'll use right away instead of waiting for it to break down. Kyle puts you put tropical plants in it. Good for you. Yeah, mine, couldn't have a tropical plant in mine. I don't have any heat or anything. I see your follow-up, Crockett. Yeah, I do. Melissa, fall into winter garden. So in Texas, you should be able to grow, as I do, throughout the winter. Cabbage, from hardiest to least hardy, everything can go below freezing. The hardiest would go to about 26 degrees would be cabbage, kale, collards, broccoli. Turnips do pretty good. Spinach is very hardy. Brussels sprouts. And then the next tier would be like radishes, lettuce, stuff like that, chard, all that. So in your area, you should be able to grow pretty good. Yeah, gardeners, see, they've got a cattle panel greenhouse, and I've seen a lot of them. And I'm gonna tell you the truth. If something happened to mine, I would either build a cattle panel greenhouse, or I would build like a stick greenhouse, with wood. I would not buy another one of those, just basically because I've been there, done that. Truth be told, when I ordered mine, they messed up the order and I got two. So I have another one in my shed, and I probably still wouldn't assemble that one and put it up. If I did, I would reinforce it with wood and make it more permanent, and then I would change it completely. But I think those cattle panel greenhouses, after what I've done and what I've seen low tunnels do, and what you can put in there to change the heat of them, I think they're great. I don't see any problem with it, and it is a lot cheaper. Yeah, I know somebody who wraps their oranges, Kyle, in blankets and puts Christmas lights in them. Jeff, as you guys will see Saturday, I have completely planted my fall garden. Every bed has something in it. The only thing left is the corn bed, and I kind of discussed that in the video a little bit, but my garden is completely planted and ready to go. And I've got right at 60 days. You get a little bit of a range, so if I stretch it a little bit, I got about 60 days in my first frost. So I am just waiting to get my first I did my pre-plant and fertilizer, and now I'm waiting to come back and give it a little bit of instant push to get that growth started. So I don't know how many of what I got, but I put a lot out there, and we'll see how it goes. It's a little bit later this year. We had some weird heat stuff, and then all of a sudden it just cooled right off, and I just jumped for it. I went as fast as I could. So we'll see how it goes. But again, this is the time of year that's the exciting part to me for the garden, because you've got fall, and there's a hard cutoff date if you don't do anything. But then if you can kind of work it and extend it, then you go even deeper. So did I answer? Is there any questions about fall gardening that I did not hit for you guys? Let me know. Or winter gardening, excuse me. I got fall in the brain. It's funny. It's funny. I drive around my area, and everybody's gardens are totally empty, and mine's totally full now, like replanted. And I just think about it, and it reminds me that there's a lot of people in the world that don't realize what you can do. We live here. We have, I don't know, it's like 200 and I don't know, 250. Let's just say 250 day growing season. I'll get to the pest pressure in a second, Brian. But in that 250 days, people are only planting 100, 120 days, and you've got like all these other days, and that is just the days in between the frost dates. And then you expand past that. I mean, I planted my broccoli in January last year, and I plan to do the same again. So it's crazy. Pest pressure in fall is real. It's so much easier than summer. You basically have the cabbage worm. You get aphids. Snails become a problem. What else? I guess you could get slugs. I don't really have slugs. Those are really what I deal with, and it's BT, 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 BT. If it's a soft-bodied insect, you use BT. So anything when you see little holes your all in your leaves, that's the cabbage worm. You'll see the little green worms on them. Spray it with BT. Come back 10 days later, do it again. Do it again. They're done. 7 days even. And then aphids. I was brain farting on the name. Aphids are everybody's worst nightmare, and they're really easy to take care of. If you first notice them, get you some dish soap, put it in a spray bottle with some water, spray them down. The soap does just like our hands. It desiccates them, but it kills them. And then if that doesn't work, neem oil on them. And it's usually one treatment and they're done. Usually. Now, if you let it get crazy out of control, you can have to do a couple, but that's about it. And as far as snails go, I can't remember the name of the product that I use. You can get it at Lowe's, Home Depot, and all that. It's in a white bag, and it's little white pellets. I can't remember the name of it. If I can find it, I'll try and look for it real quick. But you can use that, but you got to be careful because it's got a lot of phosphates in it. So you could pump up your garden with phosphates, which is why I planted buckwheat in my garden, because that eats the phosphates. So I'm trying to lower it a little bit. It's not going to do anything crazy, but it'll help. So I hope that answered the pest question. Jeff's got it, man. Jeff knows. Listen to Jeff. He's got it. I mean, it really does. It's one of those things where they can handle the cold. Now, we got to understand here, and I understand more than a lot of people think, that there's people in Florida and there's people in Minnesota. And I'm trying to get in the camera. And in between, there's a bunch of different ranges of cold, buddy. And then you got North Carolina and you got California, and there's a bunch of different colds in there, just like there's a bunch of different heats. But at the same time, okay, let me put it to you this way. We have a listener on the Backyard Gardens podcast. He may be in here. And he at one point he lives in zone 3 or 2. One of those. Can't remember. Well, he built a greenhouse. And he said he was going to grow in it all winter. And we kind of talked back and forth. And he had a smart thermometer in there, and he gave me access to it. So I'd watch his temperatures. He showed me how he built it too, which I'll get into. He grew in it all winter. I think it died out, I want to say around March, and April. And his last frost date was in like late June. But he was able to grow it. Now, what did he do? So again, it's how much do you want to do? So he built a plastic structure. He built a frame around that plastic structure with an air gap. And he put another plastic around it. And then he set a fan in it to blow air into it to create a buffer. And then he put a wood stove in there. And then that would heat the greenhouse on top of it. But he was able to grow all winter. He was willing to do the work. And he did it. I mean, man did it. And it was impressive, you know. So there's always an option. It's just how much do you want to do it? Now, let me get the elephant out of the room. If my greenhouse was right next to my back door and I had an electrical plug right next to it, I'd be running heat in it. Absolutely. But because of where I built it all the way down the football field, which is not a football field, which you know what I'm saying, how long it is, I'm not going to run power out to it. Hey, 54, how's it going? Any more questions about winter gardening? So there's I put a question up top and about what do you want to talk about in the next live. Again, you guys pick the lives, not me. So you pick. And then if there's something in there that's either repeatable or I have to make a decision, and I'll give us an option to do a poll at the end of this show. So Bricktop has bush citrus plants in pots, and you can bring them in. Excellent. So, okay. Let's talk about fruit trees for a second. Everybody wonders if they'll fruit in pots. Okay. If you don't know, you're about to know. I've been growing bonsai trees for many, 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 many years. And one thing that I've seen repeatedly over and over and over again is I've seen pomegranates, I've seen plums, I've seen cherries, and I've seen apple trees in pots this big and that deep give apples. Now, and give fruits. That being said, there wasn't a lot, right? It's nothing you would write home about. And typically people don't let them fruit when they're in that because it's messes up the design and weakens the tree and the state that it's in the pot that it's in. But if you keep it warm and you keep that growth cycle going, I don't see why it wouldn't produce. But you definitely need to keep it going and keep it going. Now, fruit trees can sometimes take 3 to 4 years before they produce, depending on what tree you got. So that's that too. If you want to grow trees in pots like that, I would really recommend looking for like a container friendly variety. But that being said, you can put anything in a pot and you can grow anything in a pot. Don't let anybody tell you any different, because I got trees out there that are 50 years old that are in pots this big and they grow. So Sluggo was the name of it, Vicky. Thank you. Sluggo. Thank you. I knew somebody knew what it was. You just got to be careful with the amount of phosphates that it'll put into your garden. That's all. And that's where, yeah, the character length. That's where the soil tests come into play. But, that stuff does help. The Sluggo helps with the snails and so on and so forth. But if your plants are big enough, the snails really aren't an issue. And I'm just going to go ahead and say it. Y'all can crucify me if you want. Not using wood chips helps with the snails as well. I'm getting flashbacks from when I started the podcast. I did like a handful of episodes all by myself. And I was sitting in a closet, right? Because if you sit in a closet, you have all the clothes as like a sound buffer, and it had really good sound. But I would be talking just to myself, right? And it would be awful. I start coughing, my mouth would get dry, all that stuff. And so now, and then I got Batavia on the show, so it's been a lot better. But I'm having flashbacks to that by sitting here talking. I've never had ants carry away Sluggo that I know of, but I stopped using it. So Bricktop, I had a friend who grew key limes. It was funny. We bought the tree. It was this big in a cardboard box. And 2 years later, we were making gin and tonics. This is when I used to drink. And we were making gin and tonics with the key limes right off of it. So it's definitely possible. And just so you know, I didn't stop drinking because I was an alcoholic. I just stopped drinking because I just don't like it. I never had an alcoholic drink that I liked. Never. Hey, Connie. Hey, Alan. Well, thanks for watching. West of, I believe it. I got this stupid heart icon that it's not. This is not friendly for me to look at, but looks like you said Scotland. So difficult to comment on garden variables. It really is, because everybody's garden all over the world is different all the time. I'm sure your garden's probably a little bit wet. my garden's a little bit dry, and it's almost too warm today, but not bad. So Jeff, I see what you said about onions. I've never done middle day onions, and I was going to do a video about some stuff I'm not growing in the future, but one of them, I'm not growing onions again this year. I'm going to take a break. Kind of messed up my mojo in the garden a little bit, so I'm gonna kind of move on. Yeah, Alan, wet, wet, wet. I'm sure it is. When I was a kid, I lived in Dunoon, Scotland for a while. I don't remember a whole lot, but I remember it was always damp. Let's see what we got here. All right. So next questions are next week's live. What do you guys want to talk about? Let us know right here in the comments, because you pick. Danlo, I've never been to the Pacific Northwest. It's one of the places I would like to go. I just imagine it raining all the time. And I know that's not necessarily the case, but that's what I imagine. So are you guys growing into the winter time? Like, is your goal to get your garden to go to winter or through winter? Which one is it that you're trying to do? My goal, I can grow through winter, but my optimal goal is to get everything till about mid-January, and then I start planting again in February. So it's nice to have that little break. So Connie wants to go through winter. Good. Alan, it is almost garden season. Connie, where are you located at? Cold weather crops. So we talked about that earlier. There's really two options: frost kill or winter kill crops, which means you plant it now and then in the winter it just kills off. And then you have other ones that are, more cold tolerant that can go longer into the winter. I like buckwheat for this time of year, and then the frost kills it. Clover, stuff like that. The frost will kill it. For fall, you can do like peas. I'm just gonna give you like common. I'm not gonna get like super technical. There's peas you can do, different varieties of peas, mustard greens, winter ryegrasses. All that stuff is very hardy, but it's not hardy like for you. The winter rye would go probably throughout the whole winter for you, and then you just turn it back into the soil. But depending on where you are, you're still going to get a die off at some extent. It just lasts a little bit longer. Fall schedule watering, Brian, it starts like this. Before I plant my fall garden, I'm watering every 3 days, deep watering with my drip irrigation for 75 minutes every 3 days. Fall garden goes in, it goes down to watering every 2 days for about 70 minutes. And then as it gets cooler, it'll go to 3 days, 4 days, 5 days. And that's typically how I do it. Now, that being said, this is totally different too. In the fall, in the winter especially, if you're getting rain, you've got to cut your water off. In the summer, you can get rain and let it water, and it's not really that big a deal. It'll kill your plants, it'll drown them, you'll get root rot, and you'll have diseases. So if you get rain, there are times in the winter time where I do not water for 2 weeks at a time. That happens every year. So keep that in mind as you're doing your watering. Connie, in Texas, you can grow straight through the winter. Hey, Christina, I'm glad that you came through. First year fall garden, congratulations. Yeah, I hope you guys don't get hit by the hurricane too hard. Our prayers will go out for you. Um, you can get through the hurricane. Your garden can get through a hurricane though, just depending. You'd be surprised. Yeah, buckwheat is good for green manure and phosphate uptake. That's what I use it for. Plant them potatoes by Valentine's Day, Connie. That's what I do. So 54, you're done after Halloween because of lack of sunlight. Totally respect that. You absolutely know that. And that is a hell of a fall garden right up to it. I mean, you can't ask for anything more than that, you know. You're probably going to harvest a little bit more after that, but wrapping up, and I correct me if I'm wrong, you're up north, so that's really good. Because I've had when I was in New England, we had some Halloweens that I mean I remember being like, excuse me, I don't know. Like I'm used to like dressing up like a pirate. Like you wear as little clothes as possible because it's hot. And up there it was like I couldn't wear enough. Your okra trees are falling. Yeah, so I used to order potatoes, Connie, offline, and what I got was they never sent them in time. They always sent them to me a month late because they would use a calculation for when I had to plant them. And I was like, no, I'm telling you, you've got to send them to me by February. I need them. And I needed to prepare them. So I really needed them by February 1st so I could prepare my potatoes. But they wouldn't send them to me. And then I'm putting them in late. So then I started buying them locally. I just went to Tractor Supply and bought them. And the guy, when I went there this year, I went in January and I was like, man, you got potatoes? He's like, we got them in pallets out back, but they're not coming out for a while. He's like, you need a couple bags? I was like, absolutely. He went out there and opened the pallets and sold them to me. And when I went in to go see him, he told me he sold them to me a month before anybody else bought them. And I had an amazing crop this year. So I'll be doing that again. English peas. I don't call anything. Honestly, James, I don't know what an English pea is. Um, I haven't, I hear people say it, but I don't know what they are. Jeff, I've sold 400 pounds of honey this year. I've done really, really well. Thank you for asking. So we're hoping to get a fall crop, hopefully in a couple weeks. We'll see. I showed the beehives on the video Saturday. You'll see them towards the end. And then we've got another farm up the road that I've got to go out there Friday and see what's going on. I don't know how good or bad that's going to do. Let's see here. So if you guys want to know about cover crops, I buy my cover crop seed as of right now. Let me make sure I'm still alive. Okay, yeah. I buy them from American Meadows. And the reason why I buy them, they're a little bit more expensive, but they make it really, really easy. Once I get through the pop-ups here. I don't know. Can I share my screen? Oh, well, I've never grown sweet peas successfully. I've always grown snow peas because they do so well for me. So this year I'm going to try sweet peas. We were talking about it on the podcast today. Again, that episode will come out I think it's the 25th of September. And somebody wrote into the show. We were talking about peas, and I was like, you got shelling peas, snapping peas, snow peas. It's so confusing. And they sent in a clarification. And so I made the declaration, I'm going to throw out all of my peas this year and start over from scratch and really try and get a decent crop of peas this year. Alan, so this time of year, if your trees are turning yellow indoors, it's lack of sunlight. It's totally natural. When I bring my tropical bonsai trees in, they will drop leaves, and it's just the tree adjusting to the amount of light that it's getting. And even if that tree stays inside year round, typically you're still getting less light in your house, and so you're still going to drop leaves, and that's just the tree adjusting to it. The worst thing you can do is like keep watering it heavy or something like that. If you gave it a dose of food, just water it like normal, let it dry out a little bit, and see what happens. Why do they call sweet peas English peas? I don't get it. Oh, I was looking up. Like, y'all got me all sidetracked, mixed up in the game. So if you go to the American Meadows website, they don't really have anything for like a drop down that I can find easily for cover crops. So you just search cover crops, and like right now, they've got a fall cover crop seed mix. So I believe that's what I put in my wild garden. Yeah, and it's got in it winter wheat, field peas, annual ryegrass, red clover, and hairy vetch. So, I just do something like that. Super simple. I don't try and go crazy and get into the weeds about what different crops will do and stuff like that. I just try to keep it really simple and just go from there. Last thing I want to do is create an issue or mass confusion on my part. I don't need to get super technical with it. I just need to I put the cover crops in because that makes me feel like I'm doing something that I need to do. And I gravitate towards the buckwheat because it helps my bees. And Dan Lowe, you just get used to it. What can I say? Experience, but I hear you. It's one of those things that I don't want to complicate it. And we started a new bee club in my area, and we were talking Monday night, and one of the guys was like, he had I don't know how big his garden was, whatever it was, but he put buckwheat in it, and he said he had the best fall crop ever and the healthiest bees because they were getting all the pollen they needed. So that's why I do it. Jeff, I don't like the cold weather. I surf. When I'm not on here and I'm not in the garden, I'm surfing, and it makes it uncomfortable. So I don't like the cold weather. Alan, I would not change the soil this time of year. If you want, actually, I take that back. Now, you have to remember, I'm not super familiar with Scotland, but I know you're getting into your dark period. If you change the soil like now, it could be root bound, could be an issue. So what you would do is in spring and late winter, right before it starts to get warm, you can take that tree out of your pot, take a cake knife, and then cut 1/3 of the roots off the bottom. And what that'll do, just take that. If it comes out like the whole root ball, you just pull it out and you got this big giant root ball laying on its side, and just cut it like a cake, drop it back in, repot it. And what that does is all those roots that you cut, it's totally different when you're growing a tree in a pot. It will end up creating really fine roots, which are the feeder roots for the tree, and that's what makes the tree boom and grow. So you might have to remove some roots. I would not do any kind of root pruning now, but that's what we do for all of our bonsai trees and stuff like that. We'll remove them, and we regularly root prune at the right time of year. Yeah, I just reseeded. I took my first crop down, and then I reseeded what was the wild garden. So until I move those beds, it's all just buckwheat, and it's growing now. Actually, I probably should go out and water it because I had to borrow one of the drip lines to put somewhere else. All right. Let's see here. Okay, next live. We need to figure out what you guys want to talk about next week. So go ahead and shoot in the comments. Let us know what you want to talk about live, and then we're going to figure it out. We've got about 5 more minutes left because I need to go water my buckwheat. Overwintering plants. Okay. Especially for climates that get frost. It did not go through Bricktop, but I got you. Ooh, Brian, selecting the best crops to grow in your region. Yikes. That's a good one. Any more? Bueller. So I see that a lot more people come in towards the end. So what I may end up doing is I may go back and I may start doing these like 30 minutes later. So starting at 2:30, if that's okay with you guys. I know people are working, but this is just the way it is. I got stuff I got to do at night. Buying spring and summer plants early. You're just all good, Dan Lowe. Overwintering plants, selecting the best crops, buying. Oh, okay, seeds. I can tell you, Jeff, if you're just talking about buying seeds, just like for next year, absolutely buy them soon. Absolutely. We sell seeds through our podcast, and we plan to have all of our seeds up for sale. The goal is by the middle of October, so we can get people going. Yes, almost bedtime, Alan. Good night. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Andrew, you just do it. I have a certain path of the way I like to do things in my garden in the winter or throughout the year. In the winter is like construction, adding dirt and stuff, like more active stuff that will warm me up. But I mean, I just get used to it. If you get a notification for the live, yeah, I don't know how they send out the notifications or not. I do what I think needs to be done. This is the first live that I've done where I didn't have to restart. So this is a win. All right, I'm going to put a poll up. Not that way, because that's not the way to do it. Overwintering plants, or what was the other one? All right, there's a poll up there. Answer the poll, and that will decide what we talk about. I will tell you that if you do selecting crops for next year or the best crops for your area, you're not going to like what I got to say. But I deliver bad news and make it sound like good news. Can you get mushroom compost cheap? I got a really good compost connect. So yeah, I do get it cheap, but I don't use mushroom compost. I buy topsoil or I buy 50-50 mix, one of the two. And 50-50 mix is 50% topsoil, 50% compost. That's what I buy. And then I make my own. Oh, we need somebody to vote. We're at a close. It's almost too close to call. I'm gonna give another couple seconds for everybody to vote. Let me get a notepad. Miguel, I would do a live about saving seeds, but I would not do one specifically about flowers and I would just do like an overall about saving seeds at some point. Now we're at a dead tie. So let's do this. Since we're split, we'll do we're going to end this poll. See, there's 30 people watching and 13 votes. Come on, man. Y'all got to vote. You know what I'm saying? That's how it works. And then I'm going to do one more. And I'm mostly... Hey, that's all right, though, if I get that ratio of votes that I got is better than we'll get in the election, so it works for me. So just so you guys know, when people like me put polls and stuff like that up, it's really important because what I'm doing is I'm trying to figure out how to make content that you want to see. It's not necessarily about me making the content; it's what you want. So if you guys don't answer, you guys can't complain. Green manure, Alan, was that a all right, I got a couple topics here. I think we need to do one about cover crops too, because that's come up a lot. Y'all want to talk about cover crops? I'm not going to do another poll. Just say yes or thumbs up or something stupid in the comments. So we got a couple weeks filled up. I'll work through these. It's going to go like this: selecting the best crops for your area, overwintering plants. Compost into the 80s. I'll have to figure out how to do that. Okay, so we'll do cover crops, and then probably looks like we'll do saving seeds. You know, I've done videos about that, and it's not very popular. But I think lives are a different beast all in itself because it's more of a conversation, even though it's like me talking and reading your questions and stuff. But that should get us going. And okay, yeah, we'll do one about saving seeds too. We give it about 10 seconds. Jeff, you don't like saving seeds? I've never heard anybody say that, but I respect the honesty. Interesting about saving seeds. All right, this will help me prepare in advance and doesn't put so much pressure. So yeah, next Wednesday we'll go right around 2:30, and we'll see if we can't have be more open for people. And I don't know how to get them to. I don't know how to get them to notify you. I just do what I'm told. That's all I can do. But that's it, everybody. So wintering, growing into winter, try and stay on that path. Stay tuned to the channel because I grow in winter, so I'm going to be talking about that. And then we're just going to go right into seed starting, lots and lots of seed starting, all that stuff. So once we get that going, you guys should be in the right path. You always take everything that I say and amend it to your area. Basically, what that means is if you're farther north than me, you need to go a little bit earlier. And if you're farther south than me, you need to go a little bit later. Luckily, I'm like right in that middle range. So it kind of works out for me. No problem, Andrea. I'm glad you learned something. Don't let the gardening or even homesteading overwhelm you. Just take it one step at a time. We'll get through it. Keep watching the channel. We'll get through all of these things. I'm finding that I'm having to redo old videos and stuff like that because people, a lot of people don't want to go dig, and I don't blame you. So works for me because luckily all of these things are rinse and repeat. We do the same things every year, but every year something changes with a method that I'm doing. So I bring that guys to you, or I bring that to y'all. And hopefully we can keep everybody going in the right direction. So we'll end that poll. We got more votes. See, y'all listen. I like it. I like it. All right. So everybody be safe, be cool. Next Wednesday at 2:30. I'll try and get a post up sooner, and maybe it'll notify you guys. And just keep an eye out for it, and we can go from there. And by the way, the picture that was the cover for this, that cabbage survived and harvested when it was twice its size, and it was covered in ice. So there you go. That's for winter gardening. Everybody have a good day. See ya.